Good morning and welcome to the BN Daybreak. I'm Patrick Kidd. Nvidia's latest earnings and revenue outlook have lifted the AI mood. Here's Doug Krishna from Bloomberg News Now.
After the bell, Nvidia gave another bullish forecast for quarterly revenue. CEO Jensen Huang said the enterprise adoption of AI agents is skyrocketing. Now, that would suggest it's not just hyperscalers buying Nvidia products, but corporations as well. And we got reaction from Bloomberg analyst Mandeep Singh.
They're pointing to 77% growth in their fiscal 1Q. So that goes to show, and the proof point you can see in the hyperscaler capex. The hyperscaler capex seems to be going up as well. So it's underpinned by healthy fundamentals. We know why NVIDIA's top line is accelerating.
Right.
Because the capex seems to be accelerating. And all this points towards more inferencing, more demand for AI compute.
That is Bloomberg analyst Mandeep Singh. Shares in Nvidia up by more than 1% in late U.S. trading. Now, Nvidia's numbers suggest further future disruption coming from artificial intelligence.
Still with Bloomberg News Now, fresh developments in the Jeffrey Epstein saga, with new scrutiny on some very big names.
Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers will resign from teaching duties at Harvard University at the end of the school year. Now, this follows revelations that Summers' ties to Jeffrey Epstein were deeper than previously known. Summers' name appeared hundreds of times in newly released Epstein files. Summers has been on leave from teaching at Harvard since November. Bill and Hillary Clinton are set to face questioning from lawmakers over the couple's ties to Jeffrey Epstein, especially in regards to donations to the Clinton Foundation boosted by Epstein. More from Bloomberg's Amy Morris in Washington.
The Clintons are expected to testify before a House panel over the coming 2 days. They'll be sworn in. They have to answer questions under oath, and they initially refused to appear. They finally agreed after months of negotiations. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer says they have a lot of questions.
One of the questions that we all have in both parties is how was Jeffrey Epstein able to surround himself with the most powerful people in the world?
House Oversight panel Democrats will brief the media after those depositions. The Clintons say they're being selectively prosecuted by Republicans on that committee. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Robertson, a small town in the middle of nowhere where a wine farmer claims to have sold a Volkswagen up to WeBuyCars. A farmer. What car did you really sell them?
A VW.
Right here in Robertson.
Small town, but we know about WeBuyCars.
Yeah, but what's a farmer doing with a VW up?
It was just a run around.
Cool cover story. And I see you traded it in for this, like a double cab Renee. Were they all out of ranges?
WeBuyCars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
AI giant Anthropic is making a notable shift on safety, with US Pentagon and competition pressure in the background.
You go into the blog that Anthropic has pointed out, and yes, they talk about some of the steps that have already been taken in terms of safety, some of the achievements they've already made, but they really highlight that despite rapid advancements in AI capabilities in the last 3 years, government action in AI safety has been slow. Is that what they're trying to call out here?
Carol, that is one thing they're trying to call out, but they are also acknowledging the stiff competition that they face in the AI space globally. They are competing with OpenAI, XAI, and of course with Google for a piece of what Marta Norton was also acknowledging as a massive competitive landscape. There's so much business to be done out there, and we have seen industry after industry shaken by the prospect of some of these new tools from Anthropic and from other providers that could really change the way business is done and how people actually do their work from day to day. So there is both that question, but then also the one that you zeroed in on, and that is that they are not seeing any traction at the federal level when it comes to discussion of these safety-oriented issues. And of course, that's the conversation coming up now at the Pentagon. The company is insisting that it will not be relaxing that those two standards, that it doesn't want mass surveillance of Americans via the Pentagon, through its technology, or the fully autonomous use of its technology in weapons. But again, this relaxation of that safety principle when it comes to competition is a significant and worthy change to note here.
Take us inside the room. We reported that Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei met with Secretary Hegseth, I believe, yesterday, Tuesday. There is a deadline of Friday from the Pentagon's perspective, but in our reporting, Anthropic has conditions of its own that it is putting to the Pentagon quickly.
Yes, Anthropic has set those conditions as no mass surveillance and no use of its technology in fully autonomous targeting. And now those conditions, it's unclear at what point they will yield. The Pentagon says, look, you don't need those conditions. We will abide by the law. And we do not want, and this is according to the Pentagon's own new AI acceleration strategy released last month, they don't want companies to attach asterisks or conditions on the use of technology by the Pentagon if they are doing business with the government. And they have threatened the company with some dire consequences. One is that it would use the Defense Production Act to simply, in essence, impound the technology and use it over Anthropic's objections, or failing that, they would actually declare Anthropic a supply chain risk. And that would mean that vendors with the Pentagon would have to certify that they are not using Anthropic's technology, and that would pose a business risk to Dario Amodei and his business.
Back to South African news. BizNews editor Alec Hogg reports his review of the 2026 national budget and what it means for taxpayers. Hogg was at Parliament yesterday.
So why is it a good news budget? Well, point one, fiscal drag. Fiscal drag is something that means that you pay more tax every year because of inflation. Your salary goes up by the inflation rate, and we have a progressive tax system. That means that the rate rises, and if nothing else happens, you just pay more tax. Now, good practice, and South Africa has usually had good practice, means that you adjust those tax tables every year by the rate of inflation. We haven't done it for 2 years, but we did it this year. So there was about 12 billion rand that was given back to taxpayers. It's all right, but even so, it just shows what happened in the last 2 years. It didn't have to occur. And part of that was the 20 billion rand tax increase that got lost somewhere in last year's fracas over the VAT, remember, and that had been tabled. It was supposed to come in this year. It didn't. So that, too, is very good news. More good news is that there was a revenue overrun. The economy is doing better than anticipated. VAT produced about half of around a 22 to 28 billion. We're not exactly sure on which the right number is. The minister said 21.8, and the Treasury said 28.2. But anyway, don't know who's got dyslexia, but the reality is there was an overrun, and most of that money is being put into Transnet to jack up the rail system, which means more exports, which means more revenue into the country, which means better for all of us. But finally, the thing that I really liked about it and why I believe this is the best budget in 16 years is because of the housekeeping that we are seeing. The new broom is sweeping very clean at Treasury, Dr. Duncan Peterser, the Director General, and there is a long list of issues that hadn't been addressed for many, many years. Like one that goes back to 1996, when if a poor unfortunate person died on duty while they were at work, they got a tax benefit of 300,000 Rand. Well, that hasn't moved since 1996 because, like many of the other limits, it hadn't been adjusted, just hadn't been taken care of. Poor housekeeping. That, by the way, has now gone to 1.3 million. So all round, I rate this 8 out of 10. That means it's an A.
Good news from Southern Africa. BizNews partner DCC Hotel Group showcases world-class hospitality across the region. We spotlight more than 100 carefully selected lodges supporting tourism, local communities and conservation. Here in Hermanus, whale watching and coastal charm await. Your home for the BizNews Conference 2026.
And to close this morning's show, South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago on how the inflation target shift is feeding through into markets and what it saved the country.
Governor, is there any way that you can tell us how much the change in the markets since the introduction of inflation targeting has actually saved the country? Because clearly it has had an impact, and it would be interesting if you can quantify that.
Alec, change in a market as a result of the change in the inflation target it exceeded our most optimistic expectations. Actually, when we went out, the staff of the bank went out with a paper. We expected that the impact would be a move in bond yields of about 200 basis points. We expected that the currency would strengthen, and we expected that the country risk premium would decline, thus improving the risk profile of the country. You can go back and look at that paper. But what we now calculated is that from December 2024 to date, bond yields in South Africa had gone down by a good 400 basis points. That's significant. And it's a significant saving that we could actually adopt. So it had improved sentiment. It had turned out to be better than what we had expected. Of course, there were other moving parts. The change in commodity prices meant that it propelled and accentuated the appreciation of the currency. And we saw that feeding through into the inflation process. And lastly, is that what the change, the lowering of the target has done, is that the channel that we expected to be more pronounced had been the expectations channels. What people, the price setters expect will happen to prices in the future. And what we had seen was that in December, when the inflation expectations survey by the BER came out, and inflation expectations were at their lowest since we started surveying inflation expectations in South Africa. And that is significant, because that decline also said to us that inflation expectations are converging towards the target. So the reform was significant. It led to the benefits that we had expected, but the benefits were actually more than what we had initially expected.
That's been this morning's Biz News Daybreak. I've been Patrick Kidd for biznews.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I won't see you tomorrow, but our Biz News editor Alec Hogg will.